My parents were Arthur Glasfeld and Lucy Edith Charlotte Glasfeld. They were born in 1894 and 1901 respectively, and married in Berlin in 1922. Papi was the youngest of 9 children born to Rudolf Glasfeld and Ernestine Glasfeld, all in Kalisz, Prussia. Papi was only 4 years old when his father, Rudolf, died. After his father's death, the family moved to Berlin, and I have no idea how they lived, but have never heard any tales of hardship. Both my parents went to school for 8 years, which was mandatory for those not going to university. Muti served a 3-month bookkeeping apprenticeship, and then went to work at my step-grandfather's cigarette factory, Trella. I bet accountants had not been invented yet. As it so happens, Papi also served a bookkeeping apprenticeship at a pharmaceutical company. It lasted 3 years and ended in January 1915, when he left to enter the army. Papi was in the communication corps at the French front, but very seldom talked about it. He did once speak of the horror of sleeping in muddy, rat-infested trenches, and claimed to have never fired his gun because he was too lazy to clean it. My father was certainly one of the toughest people I'd ever known, and it has occurred to me that to anyone who has been through 4 years of war, life cannot offer that many other scary moments. I was born at 122 Schwanweberstrasse, Reinickendorf West, Berlin, at 2:20 p.m. on Sunday, February 15th, 1931. Our unit was on the second floor of the street-facing building that had 2 more same-sized buildings behind it. Behind the third building was our garden and my swing set and sandbox. I got to ride my pedal car in the patios behind the other 2 buildings. When we moved out in December 1938, I got into the basement for the very first time and found a guitar that I learned had belonged to my mother. I had Muti pack it so I could make money playing music in Ecuador. Along with many other things, the guitar was stolen before it got to us. The aftermath of my birth did not go well for Muti, and so I remained an only child. Auntie Selma and Uncle Kurt rented the apartment directly across the hall from ours, and when my cousin Klaus was born 2 years later, we were practically brought up as brothers. They remained in Germany and survived, although Uncle Kurt did forced labor throughout. I do recall the story of Uncle Kurt sleeping in the hallway to discourage the Russian soldiers who were raping and pillaging their way through their part of Germany, just as the Germans had done on their march through Russia. Hitler came into power on January 30th, 1933, and Papi became unemployed a couple years later because one was not allowed to do business with Jewish-run firms. In theory, I was isolated by my parents from any knowledge of what was going on. But you've heard me tell the story of when Muti and I boarded the streetcar, and I pointed at 2 brown-shirted SA men and yelled, "Look, Muti, there are 2 of those people Papi does not like." Some of my friends were in the Hitler Jugend, and I could not understand why I was not allowed to join. Elementary school was a short walk from home. I completed my first year and a half of school there. We wrote in Gothic script and read from a primer that was mostly about Hitler and his love of children and flowers. The day started with the singing of the national anthem, which, like every song since, I just mouthed. Years later, it was easy for me to understand how kids in Germany would tattle on their parents. Papi tried to persuade Muti that we should leave Germany when Hitler came to power in 1933. She was willing, but she was not willing to leave Europe. Papi did not think that would be good enough. Eventually, they decided to try for Australia and the USA because both spoke reasonable English, but they found no way to gain entry. It is Uncle Herman who came bounding up our stairs one day in mid-1938, exclaiming that he'd found a country that would take us, Ecuador. The story is that they rushed for an atlas to find out where that was. We got the entry visa on condition we would devote ourselves to agriculture. I guess that one of the things that kept so many from leaving Germany is that you were only allowed to take $6 per person out of the country. Apparently, the German mark had no foreign value. Days later, once aboard ship, Muti was dumb enough to admit to Papi that she had rolled up 1 or more worthless 1,000 Deutsche Mark bills in a pair of his socks and shoved them into one of his shoes. Customs did pull a shoe from the suitcase, removed the sock, and unrolled it. To this day, I can only imagine how Omi must have felt. Fortunately, it was the wrong shoe. When you think about it, just one of the billions of paths that would have prevented your existence. We left around December 13th, 1938.